Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. This article comes to you guys from Hindustan Times. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out. So, a lot of people have been asking this question, and you guys can see it right here in the title. Verizon lost nearly 290,000 customers in just 3 months, but why are so many leaving? That's the question. I've had people ask me this over and over again, right? And as of this recent earnings, people are asking me this again. Private messages, right? I've seen people asking this on Reddit. Why are so many people still leaving Verizon? Right. So then we kind of go down the line. We say, is it pricing? I don't know. I mean, if you go to T-Mobile now today, taxes and fees are back. They are priced the same, if not more expensive in certain cases. So price, unless you're strictly moving to MVNOs, cable players, and that's your reasoning to get a lower price, then that's fine, right? But majority of the growth is still coming to T-Mobile and AT&T in the postpaid space, right? If you look at cable's growing. Charter did 500,000 ads for the quarter, so maybe those Verizon customers are looking for something cheaper, and they're moving to cable. It's a possibility, but I still think overall, if you look at the churn levels, you look at the market, you look at growth, Verizon is priced. I mean, they're all priced just about the same, right? The discounts, the signature discounts that you can get with AT&T, I mean, that's all give and take, right? T-Mobile, you might get a third line free, but they're all priced just about the same. So I don't think pricing is the big factor in this on people leaving, right? It still plays some factor in people leaving. I just don't think it's the majority anymore because everyone else is priced the same. And even now, prepaid and MVNO, they have higher end plans that give you more, right? But they're still about 45, $50 a line, right? In some cases, 35, right? So if you have 4 or 5 lines, even that adds up, right? So it's still cheaper, but it does add up the more lines that you have, right? If you have family of 4, family of 5, right? So is it really pricing? I would say no, right? So then you shift down the customer service. Does Verizon necessarily have the best customer service? No, right? But the other carriers, they have bad experiences too. So it's not like there's one definitive carrier that's just that much better at customer service, right? Is T-Mobile bringing more people stateside? Possibly, right? I've called T-Mobile in the last few weeks several times, and I've always got somebody stateside. So that lets me know they're trying to end the overseas operation. Because I used to get a lot of overseas personnel when I would call T-Mobile customer service, and I'm starting to get less and less and less of that. So AT&T, I still hear that's kind of a mess. It's a hit and miss, right? Because they still have fiber departments and wireless and all of that. So that's still a hit or miss. And in some cases, Verizon's a hit or miss too, right? So that plays a factor in it. Could Verizon be better at customer service? Yes, because they've themselves acknowledged that. They said we need to better our customer service. And with using artificial intelligence, making changes to the app, they're even acknowledging that they need to be better at customer service. So that's not coming from me. That's coming from Verizon. They've said it time and time again. They need to get better at customer service, and that's a stain on the brand. So they need to fix that. And they're well on their way of doing so, right? But some of the methods that are being used, like artificial intelligence, even though that might make customer service better, there's still going to be some people that are just not going to like that, right? They're not going to say, hey, I'm happy now that all of this is being moved to artificial intelligence, right? Some people like person-to-person interaction, right? They like to go into the store. They like to be able to call somebody on the phone and get a hold of somebody, right? With artificial intelligence, oftentimes that's just not the case, right? I called T-Mobile the other day about an issue, and I'll be honest, I was shocked. The artificial intelligence person that answered the call knew exactly what I was calling for, right? They were like, "Hey, we see that you have an issue on billing. Boom, that this amount was was too much. They already knew that before I even called in. So they were able to correct the issue with T-Mobile, but I didn't even need to speak to a person. They were able to correct it through artificial intelligence, right? And that's the model I feel that the carriers are heading in. And some people are just not going to like that, no matter the case. If it's bad customer service or not, they're just not going to like that in some cases. So, right. So with the first two, right, price, customer service, I mean, they all could be playing a factor into that. And then the brand, right? The brand perception. Verizon's perceived the most expensive. I just don't see that actually being the case because the other carriers are priced the same and they're increasing price. T-Mobile just increased price on their legacy customers. AT&T at some point will pull the pricing lever again or create a fourth tier that's more expensive. So that's going to happen. And that's going to happen every year, therefore after, right? So the carriers are going to raise price. So pricing, I just don't see that being a huge factor anymore, unless someone else comes in like very disruptive. But I just don't see that being the case anymore. We don't have a T-Mobile in the market today that's going to give away 8 free lines anymore. That's just not the case anymore. That used to be T-Mobile, but not anymore. So the real question is why? And then some have came to the conclusion maybe it's the network, right? And to be honest, Verizon themselves have acknowledged, they said, hey, look, in tier 2 and tier 3 markets, we do experience higher churn versus the tier 1 markets where we've already largely deployed C-band. They've acknowledged that themselves. But now, according to Sampath and Hans Vestberg, the CEO of Consumer and the CEO of the company, they have said they're now moving that C-band gradually through the tier 2 and tier 3 markets. So eventually, right, if you have a playbook where your churn is lower in the areas that you're deploying C-band and where it's already, deployed at scale, you take that same playbook to the tier 2 and tier 3 markets, your churn should naturally lower in those markets as well, right? It's a similar environment. Once you get more and more of that C-band out into the rural areas, suburban areas, tier 2, tier 3 markets, your churn should lower. And that's something that we have to also keep an eye on, right? Sampath said they are looking to have the lowest churn in the industry. That's what they're working towards now. And with the ambitions that they have with C-band, moving that through tier 2, tier 3 markets, getting that to 300 million pops, working the brand, right? Value. I think at some point in time, Verizon will be the best value brand on the postpaid side for families. I think that's what they're working towards, right? They want to uphold that premium image, but they want to bring value into that premium image. And I think it's going to work at some point. So that's their ambitions, right? The why is still the big question. Why are they losing that many customers, right? Analysts are asking it. People that are in the industry are asking it. But, the points that I've mentioned, it could be a little bit of everything. It could be a little bit of price, a little bit of customer service, a little bit of network. But the other carriers are dealing with the same, right? T-Mobile now has it's going to start having a pricing perception issue, especially with legacy customers. They just got increased, right? They still have a smaller network, so network is still a factor in that too, right? And then customer service. T-Mobile doesn't always have the best customer service, but they still are able to grow at the quarterly numbers that they've been growing at. And the same could be said for AT&T, right? AT&T is still behind on the C-band deployment. AT&T's customer service is hit or miss. And AT&T's pricing, generally will increase too. So all the carriers have the same problem or problems, but yet Verizon's the one taking the hit, right? So is cable playing a factor into that? It could be, right? But I just don't see a lot of the average consumer knowing that they're moving from Verizon to Verizon when they move to cable. I just think they're getting hooked on the deal, right? Hey, if you get this internet package, we'll give you a mobile line for $25 and then the second line for free, right? I think they're getting hooked on those deals. They don't necessarily understand that they're still on the same network, because people have made that argument that, hey, people are moving to cable, knowing that they're still on the Verizon network, right? And I don't think cable really is allowed to advertise that it's the Verizon network, and MVNOs aren't allowed to advertise that either. So I think it's just price, right? They like the deal, they like the pricing. Cable's gotten more aggressive and ambitious on advertising, so it's definitely working, right? So that's something that people have called out, right? Is Verizon possibly blowing up their postpaid business by moving all these customers to cable, right? It's been brought up in conversations. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Verizon seems to be playing it smart, right? They know they have to play in the value segment on price, and they're doing that with a plethora of brands. I mean, we're talking about Track Phone, Total Wireless, Straight Talk. I mean, you guys have heard me say they need to be consolidated. Maybe they will in the future. But for now, this is what we're dealing with. Verizon's still losing, 290 some thousand customers. We'll see how Q2 turns out the second quarter. Could it be less? Could it be more? Who knows? Remains to be seen. But Verizon is very, very, very sensitive to the market now. We've come to realize that, right? Every time there's a shift or there's a change in the numbers, Verizon now is putting out something into the market. A new deal of some kind, aggressive, ambitious, right? Project 624 was recently teased. We'll still have to wait and see what that's about. So, but let me know your thoughts in the comments on this. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.